Hello, members, and if you're listening on the podcast as well, hello. Back to the Salem witch trials we go. On November the 25th, the legislature approved a new court system as part of its ongoing effort to recreate the legal code of the colony under its new charter. The top court in the land would be the Superior Court of Judicature, and it would take over responsibility for all capital crimes, including the witch trials. On December the 7th, the Governor's Council appointed the judges for this court. William Stoughton would continue his role as Chief Justice of the colony. Samuel Sewall, Waite Winthrop, John Richards would serve as well. These veterans of Old Court of Oyer and Termina were joined by Thomas Danforth, the former Deputy Governor and critic of the witch trials. On December the 12th, the legislature passed a new witchcraft statute, which essentially followed the current English law against the crime. Finally, the legislature came for a special session of the Superior Court to begin on January the 3rd in Salem to deal with the remaining witch trials. Phipps also worked outside the formal legislative process to end the proceedings and ease the sufferings of those still accused. There were more than 50 people in jail awaiting trial. Their miserable conditions were worsening with the onset of winter in honey-heated cells. Phipps allowed some to go free on bail. He also discussed the witch trials with the judges before they were appointed to the Superior Court. In writing to English officials in February, he remarked that some of them were convinced and acknowledged that their former proceedings were too violent and not grounded upon a right foundation, but that if they might sit again, they would proceed after another method. Specifically, spectral evidence and the touch test would not constitute sufficient proof for conviction. When the court first met in January, jurors asked what weight they should give spectral evidence. An unnamed judge replied, as much as of chips in a wort, that is, no weight at all. In making beer, the ingredients were boiled, creating the wort, which after straining usually contained residual chips or flakes of malt. Stoughton was furious at this change in policy, still convinced that a witch conspiracy threatened the colony. He wanted the new court to continue the convictions and executions. Fortunately, he was part of a different minority of the court. Over the next 2 weeks, the court proceeded quickly. Charges against 30 of the accused were dismissed, and the court did not even bother to hear the cases of several others. It tried 22 defendants and convicted only 3, all of whom had confessed: Sarah Wardwell, Mary Post, and Elizabeth Johnson, Jr. Stoughton signed a warrant for their execution, and that of the 5 others who had received stays of execution under the Court of Oyer and Termina. Attorney General Checkley reviewed the verdicts and noted that others had not confessed and had been found not guilty. Armed with his advice, Phipps issued reprieves for all 8, at least until he heard the wishes of the King and Queen. The Superior Court heard of Phipps' decision when they met on February the 1st in Charlestown to take up more witchcraft cases. Stoughton was so enraged that he walked out of the court, leaving Judge Danforth to oversee the proceedings. He fumed that we are in a way to have cleared the land of these. By hindering the execution of justice, the kingdom of Satan was advanced, and the Lord have mercy on this country. Stoughton would return to preside over the last session of witch trials in the late April and early May, but the results would be the same. Every one of the accused was acquitted, though none were freed until they paid their prison fees. For poor Lydia Dustin, the delay proved lethal. The reading grandmother had been arrested back on April 30th, 1692, and languished in jail for months. Lydia was finally acquitted in early February 1693, only to die in prison more than a month later before her family could pay the jailkeeper his fees. It seems fitting that Tituba, whose confessions had triggered the entire process, was one of the last to face the court on May the 9th. A grand jury meeting in Ipswich refused to indict her. 14 months after her confession, the court reaffirmed that it now rejected confessions as well as spectral evidence. However, Reverend Parris refused to pay her prison fees, which would have amounted to a bit more than £7, perhaps half her value as a slave. Presumably, he did not want her in his house, where she would serve a constant reminder of the horrible events of the past year and a half. Tituba would be sold to another master to recover her jail fees, at which point she disappears from all historical records. Surely Samuel Parris and the residents of Salem Village would have wished the witch trials could disappear so completely, and effectively, of course. Historians are in general agreement regarding to the narrative of events in Salem from 1692 to 1693 based on the surviving evidence. There is far less agreement on how to explain these events. Could the trials have been stopped sooner or even prevented from taking place? To answer that question, one must first understand the nature of Salem's Massachusetts Bay's original establishment and the growing tension and problems the colony faced by the late 17th century. So that's the first part of all of the sort of revised Salem witch trials. We're going to go deeper into them as we go along, but that's just a basic overview of how things went down in Salem. If you are my member or on the podcast, you're wondering what I mean by it went by the English ways of justice, then you'll need to go back to the English witch trials in order to understand, because you see, it was England who first had the amended witch, what can I say, crap done. And then America sort of went from what they had put in their court records. So the justice for witches in Salem actually comes from the same justice given in England by us British, of course. They used the same. They didn't change it. So, yeah, if you're interested in that, then do go back to the English witch trials, because that's what Salem worked from when they were convicting witches. They took it from, the evidence, what was needed from the English court system and what they wrote down. That's why spectral evidence was thrown out, more or less, because it also was in the English ones. So, yeah. Thank you for listening. When we come back, we'll be moving on to, the city up on a hill. So, yeah, it will lead us into maybe why these witch trials began and sort of go deeper into them as we go along. Thank you for listening, and many blessings.